I begin by saying that as part of its commitment to advancing democratic consolidation in the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the African Union Election Observation Mission was deployed from the 26th May to the 3rd of June 2026 to observe the 7th general election and to assess their compliance with applicable international, regional, normative frameworks, as well as Ethiopia's legal framework governing democratic elections. The mission was led by myself and ably supported by His Excellency Geoffrey Oyama, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The mission was preceded by a pre-election assessment mission that was conducted from the 16th to the 20th of March to observe the pre-election environment and to assess the state of preparations for the election, and that team was led by His Excellency Oyama. And during its deployment, the mission engaged with key stakeholders, including the National Election Board of Ethiopia, government institutions, supporting the electoral process, political parties, civil society organizations, citizen observer groups, and representatives of diplomatic and international community, the United Nations, and head of election observation missions. This we also did when we arrived. So therefore, based on observations and stakeholder consultations conducted since arrival, our mission presents its preliminary findings, noting that the electoral process remains ongoing. Noting the significant strides made towards the consolidation of democracy, the mission further highlights the following commendable practices observed at this preliminary stage, while recognizing that the electoral process remains ongoing. The electoral environment on election day was generally calm, with voting proceeding in an orderly manner and voters being processed steadily across most polling stations observed. This provided an opportunity for voters to cast their vote unhindered. The introduction of technology, as was mentioned in voter registration, to complement manual registration processes, potentially contributed to the increased number of registered voters, specifically young people accustomed to using this technology. The high level of compliance with key voting procedures, i.e. ballot sealing, voter identification, stamping, ink marking, potentially contributed to generally predictability and consistency in the administration of the election day. Polling officials and security personnel exhibited professionalism and preparedness, which reflected a commitment on the part of NEBE to assert impartiality in the administration of election day processes. And indeed, most importantly, citizens did show strong commitment to vote, reflected in sustained and patient queuing throughout the day, demonstrating their commitment to democratic participation. There was broad and visible deployment of domestic observer teams, party agents, and media across multiple regions, which exhibited a willingness on the part of election authorities to subject their administration of election day to public scrutiny and accountability. Essential election materials were available in all polling stations observed, which suggested adequacy of the logistical preparations for the elections. Extension of voting hours to allow additional voter participation, potentially enfranchised voters who could have been excluded if balloting had been confined to the original 12 hours. Voter education support at polling stations provided voters with guidance on how to cast their ballot. Not who to cast it for, but how. I want to make that clear. The provision of basic amenities, as again was mentioned, for voters in queues such as chairs, benches, refreshments, in some cases made the long queues more bearable for the voter. Prioritization of elderly and persons with disabilities showed recognition of the value of universal access in democratic governance. The AU mission, acknowledging that democracy is an ongoing process, the mission also highlights the following areas where refinements could further enhance the integrity and efficiency of the electoral process. The mission noted the suspension of polling in 46 constituencies, notably in the Tigray and Amhara regions, which potentially affected the inclusiveness of the electoral process and undermined the full exercise of the right to vote due to the prevailing security situation. The mission acknowledges the commitment made by NEBE to ensure that elections would proceed in these excluded constituencies once the environment became conducive. The threshold of 1,500 registered voters per polling station did not facilitate optimal workload management and efficiency in the management of the polling process. The size and capacity of polling stations in some instances did not facilitate the smooth voter movement, potentially undermining secrecy of the ballot. The pace of processing of voters slowed down in order to facilitate clarification of the voting process to the voter. Low levels of voter registration of women, notwithstanding there being the higher demography, suggested some marginalization of vulnerable constituencies. Fully recognizing the electoral process is still ongoing at this stage, the AU mission offers the following summary and preliminary recommendations. The first of these is revive and standardize the threshold of registered voters per polling station to ensure optimal workload management and efficiency. 1,500 people per polling station is undoubtedly too high. Improve consistency in polling station layouts, particularly the positioning of voting booths and ballot boxes to enhance secrecy and orderly flow of votes. To ensure adequate size and capacity of polling stations to facilitate smooth voter movements and sufficient accommodation of election observers, election agents, and the strengthening and standardizing of voter education efforts across all polling stations to ensure consistency in voter understanding of procedures. We also suggest that there is need to explore opportunities to enhance equitable representation and deployment of party agents from all contesting political parties to strengthen transparency and competitiveness. To promote and further strengthen women participation, particularly in the voter registration process. And political parties, particularly those contesting at national and regional levels, should strengthen the deployment of trained party agents across polling stations to enhance transparency, improve oversight of the electoral procedures, and contribute to a more competitive electoral environment. In conclusion, and to further strengthen democratic consolidation, the mission encourages the government of Ethiopia and all stakeholders to promote inclusive and sustained political dialogue as a means of fostering national consensus and trust among political actors. Such dialogue should aim to facilitate political inclusion and the participation of all communities in the democratic governance of the country. In this regard, efforts should be made to create an enabling environment that supports pluralism, enhances equitable political participation, and promotes the integration of all diverse groups within national political and governance process. The African Union Election Observation Mission remains seized with the outstanding electoral processes and reasserts its commitment to supporting Ethiopia in consolidating democratic governance. The final African Union Observation Mission report on the 7th general election of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia will be released 30 days after the declaration of the final results. On a personal note, I want to once again reiterate that today is a day that the people of Ethiopia should be proud. Today is a day you should remember your history, a nation that stood against the wave of colonialism, united and never colonized. Never forget that. Never colonized. A nation that stood for Africa's independence and for Africa's right to self-governance and rule. A nation, as a result of this, that has become the capital of Africa. Therefore, from today, the way forward can only be one, and it is simple. That a great nation like Ethiopia should take advantage of this moment to move and further deepen political and social dialogue amongst her peoples. Bring on board those who might feel left behind and become that inclusive, united Ethiopia that was once the beacon of hope for our entire continent. Ethiopia to become that nation that leads Africa to the next stage of a truly independent, democratic continent, guided by her principles of inclusive growth and capable of living to our vision of African solutions to African problems, through dialogue and compromise and not war. Capable of leading present and future generations into an age of peace, stability, and prosperity for all. I believe Ethiopia can do this, and I leave Addis Ababa with a hope for the future and inspired by the many young men and women who formed the bulk of our observation mission. Congratulations to each and every one of you. It was happy and a joy to work with all of you. May God bless Ethiopia. May God bless Africa. And like I said, a fuller version of our mission's statement, pre-statement, will be available for distribution at the end of this press conference. I thank you.